Hi everyone! So today's video is going to be different than anything I've put on this channel before. It's not really a tutorial and it's not really a dolly transformations video. It's kind of like a strange hybrid. The intention when I started filming was that this would be a really cut and dry tutorial on how to fix doll arms on certain styles of doll bodies. However, I hit a lot of roadblocks, and in the end, what actually fixed this doll was kind of something I came up with last minute. Basically, the very start of the year, in January, we had an episode of Dolly Diaries called Broken Dolls from High Falls. And in that video, we talked about how Colleen was getting one of my Snow White dolls off display and accidentally knocked into teeny tiny musical Princess Snow White, who fell off the shelf, which is like the highest one I have, fell on the floor and her arm fell off. And I wasn't sure if I would even be able to fix her at all. And the earlier steps ended up being easier than I thought they would be, but what was supposed to be the simple part ended up being the hard part of all of this that I couldn't do. I had second thoughts about uploading this video. I have like a bunch of footage from random periods of time compiled because I didn't want to confuse people, and I felt like if the tutorial I was trying to make didn't work, maybe that would frustrate people, that I had to end up doing something else. But it's honestly not every day that I come across a doll with a broken arm, and the earlier clips when I'm explaining what was supposed to work does work on dolls. I have fixed Ken dolls this way before, and as I don't have like a broken Ken doll to show you and I'm always getting asked about how to fix doll arms, I figured having this footage would be better than nothing. And not only that, but I also want to say that sometimes things don't go according to plan. Sometimes you have to think outside the box, and I think that this whole experience has been a learning experience for me. So it's now July 2018. It has been like 7 months-ish since Snow White broke, and I'm finally making this video. And periodically this whole time, I have been trying different things on her. And because sometimes things in my life would get stressful, or I wouldn't have time, or I was trying to think of something else that might fix her, I wasn't constantly working on her, but every few weeks or so I would take another crack at it. So that's something I want to say too. If you're trying to fix a doll and what you're trying to do isn't working, take a step back and just recharge. Think outside the box, wait until you're in a better place, because one of the worst things you can do is make like a hasty decision. So I really took my time with this, and I apologize if it's kind of confusing, and I'm sorry that I wasn't able to like prove that this technique works, but it definitely works. Like, my end result obviously worked, but the original technique I was trying to show has worked for me in the past. I think it really just depends on the style doll you're working with. Snow White is very, very tiny, and I'm pretty sure she had some kind of weird arm defect in the first place because her arms just never lined up quite right in the socket, so it's probably a combination of the two. I'm going to include my original footage here. Hi everyone! So today I'm going to be sharing with you how I fix dolls with broken arms. I have Snow White here, and as you can see, she has an arm that is separated from her torso, and you can hear the piece that broke rattling around on the inside. Now, this method will not work for all broken arms on all different types of dolls and all different molds, because depending on the type of movement the arm can do, the mechanism inside the arm is going to be different. I have fixed a Ken doll this same way because he had the same movement as Snow White, which is a forward and backward motion, not outward like this. The more complicated the movement of the arm, the less likely you're going to be able to fix it, because the mechanism inside is going to be much, much more complicated. So this is why like swapping chewed hands and like destroyed arms isn't very practical, especially because once the mechanism inside is broken, even if you are able to fix it, it's probably not going to be as strong as it originally was before it was broken. So what happened to Miss Snow White is that she fell off a shelf when my sister was grabbing one of my other Snow White dolls off display, and she hit the floor, and that just caused her arm to break, which is really unfortunate because I love this doll. The Ken doll I had that was broken, I don't remember even which one he was anymore. This was before I had a YouTube. I think it was Sun Love and Malibu Ken. I went in storage one day and his arm was just off, so I'm assuming something was already like starting to break on the inside, and then just from being in storage it fell off, but I was able to fix it. So you will need a dish to heat up water in. Snow White is very small, so I'm only using a very small dish. Something to extract the broken piece from the inside of the arm. Now, Snow White is very small. These jewelry needle nose pliers can barely fit inside her arm, let alone clamp on the piece in there, but this is the smallest thing I have. For Ken, it was much easier because his armhole was much wider. So you could use pliers, needle nose pliers, tweezers, whatever you can, like get inside the socket to pull the arm out. And some kind of glue. I like to use super glue just because it works really well and it dries really fast. So the first thing you're going to want to do is fill your bowl up with water and heat it in the microwave until it's bubbling. You definitely want it bubbling. You could also heat it up on the stove, but I wouldn't recommend keeping the water in the pan because if the doll makes contact with the metal pan, I've heard that can make them melt. I've never personally tried it. So now that the water is bubbling, you're going to take the broken socket here and you're going to soak it in the water. Now you might have to get their hair kind of wet. That's just how it is, and the reason for this is hot water will actually soften the plastic, making the hole pliable enough so that you can get the broken piece out. So that's basically what I'm trying to do, is get that piece that was rattling on the inside out of her socket because it broke off here from this arm and I need to reattach it. So this is going to take me a few minutes, and because of the size of her hole, I'm probably not going to actually be able to capture it on camera for you, but you could. So I have successfully gotten this piece out. Honestly, I didn't think I'd be able to because even my most flexible tweezers couldn't get in and grip. So what I ended up doing, if you have this problem, is I coaxed the piece over, facing where her boob is, and I got these really tiny little screwdrivers, flatheads, and I stuck it in and gripped this little piece here, and I held it in the water like that. And after I could feel that it had gotten soft, I laid her flat on a towel and I kind of pressed with this, pressed the top of the flathead screwdriver and dragged it out. And it was because this was so soft, it actually kind of curled up a bit and came out. I needed to glue this broken piece back in here. So I do have the super glue now. So the key with this is that I want to let it sit, like I said, for 24-ish hours after I attach the piece before I reassemble her arm. Okay, so before I put glue on, I want to see exactly how this lines up so I can see the rough part of this connector piece. I'm gonna try to see how it originally lined up. So once I have that figured out, I'm going to apply glue to this little piece. I want to put enough on, but not too much. And you want to make sure that it's all flush. And you can see how this is going to work. That basically this little piece sits inside her arm, and that's the disc that helps you move it. And that's why I couldn't just pop her arm back in. Some dolls you can. There are some vintage Barbies that don't have this mechanism. Their knob is basically fused in place to their arm. We have Skipper dolls, the arms come off and they just pop right back in. So this is a little bit more complex. So I'm gonna let Snow White sit for, like I said, about 24 hours. Now that the glue is dry on the arm, I'm now soaking her arm and her body back in hot water. Hopefully this will make it more pliable so that I can have an easier time getting it in. So I'm going to try out a different technique using, it's kind of like what I did to fix Monster High, basically fusing a paper clip, a straightened out paper clip into both ends of the arm. to keep this arm in place. So inside her arm, she has like a piece of molding, like a bar that runs across, and I'm gonna try to like fuse the wire into that piece and then into her arm here. So this is Snow White's arm. My little technique did work. It doesn't like look like it's in there good, but it actually is. And now that all of that footage has played, I guess I'll explain really quickly, just to recap, what I tried and what worked and what didn't work. So obviously the initial plan had been to get the broken piece of her arm knob out of her torso and to glue it back in place on her arm itself, to heat the arm with the glued piece up in water and to pop it back in her socket. And this has worked before, like I said, on Ken dolls. However, no matter what kind of glue I used, it always separated when I was trying to force it in. And that's because her arm socket is so small, and at this point, like, her knob was so bizarrely shaped that I couldn't ever seem to get it in. And I'm very strong, and I think that, like, even when I was trying to use less force, it still would like slowly peel away. I would almost have her arm in place countless times, and it would always just like separate. And I tried gluing her, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 times, and it just wasn't working. So then I decided that maybe if I could relieve some of the stress, that would help in some way. So if you notice in that clip of her at the end, one of her like shoulder seams to be a bit like weird looking. It's because I actually used a razor blade and kind of cut down her seam on her shoulder and then on her side to see if maybe when I was like forcing her arm back in, if that would give it enough like space, it would kind of open up a bit so there was less pressure being put on the joint, but that did not work. I tried making the disc a little bit smaller using a razor blade. That didn't work. I tried making my own knob out of acrylic filler, which has worked in the past on one of my PJ dolls, but that didn't work. It separated right off. So what ended up working, as you saw, was basically how I fixed Monster High dolls. I heated up an end of a paper clip. I stuck it inside that like plastic bar that sits in between her back and her bust that like supports her. And then I used another paper clip that was heated up to make a hole in her arm socket. And then I joined the two together. And then I soaked her in hot water just so everything kind of tightened up. And then I popped her in the freezer, like I said, for, I don't know, a few hours. I kind of forgot about her because I was cleaning. And then I let her thaw out, and she was really good to go. It doesn't look the prettiest, but you can't see her arm at all in this dress anyways. And I did have a spare body for one of a Perfume Princess Belle, but it wasn't an exact skin color match, and I would rather fix her than use a spare body just in case like I really needed that later. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm sorry if this was a confusing video, but I hope that you can appreciate that sometimes you need to think outside the box and do something kind of weird to fix it all. Patience and refusing to give up will help you persevere. So until next time, love your dolls, love yourself, and love your life.